you've brought us a really interesting source today. It outlines the vision, the mission of a community initiative, the Ayeneh Foundation.
That's right.
And our goal really is to kind of unpack that, go beyond just the surface statement and see what their core thinking is,
Yeah.
How do they plan to actually do this community empowerment stuff?
Exactly. And this source, it really gives us a glimpse into that. It's like their strategic blueprint. What strikes me immediately, though, is the focus on the future. It's not just about managing today's problems. Their vision, especially for the near future, it's all about proactive steps, collective healing, mobilization, against some very specific things they see as risks.
Yeah, I noticed that too. It sets a certain tone, doesn't it? Very active, very dynamic. Okay, so before we get into the fighting part they mentioned, who is this actually for? Who's the focus?
Well, the main focus seems pretty clear. It's young people and families. And the overarching aim, it seems, is making sure they feel supported and empowered towards a brighter future. So it suggests, a really comprehensive approach, the whole family unit.
Right, supporting the whole structure.
Yeah.
Because I guess the health of the community depends on its youngest members, its family.
It's foundational.
Okay, so that's the positive vision.
Yeah.
But they immediately pivot to what threatens that vision.
Yeah.
And they don't mince words, do they?
Yeah, not at all.
They talk about social harms that lurks around preying on our youth and families. That language, preying on, it's quite strong, almost predatory. Why frame it like that?
Well, I think that framing is actually quite strategic, using social harms specifically.
Right.
It does a couple of things. It externalizes the problem, first off.
Right. It's not us, it's them.
Exactly. It points to these pervasive, identifiable dangers. Maybe things like isolation, maybe addiction, maybe, misinformation, things like that. Dangers that need a collective defense.
Ah, okay. So it shifts the narrative. It's not just we have issues internally. It's there's an external threat we need to unite against.
Yes. It's basically a call to mobilize embedded right there in the language they use.
And that leads into something else I found really interesting. Who the center is actually for. It's not just for people needing help, is it?
No, it's broader. They explicitly say it's for those who understand the pain of the society and want to play a constructive role in its healing.
So people who've maybe been through it themselves or deeply empathize.
That seems to be the implication. And that's where the proactive part really kicks in, I think. If you're just getting aid, you're sort of passive.
Right, a recipient.
Yeah. But by inviting people who understand the pain to become healers, to become agents of change, well, they bypass that whole typical donor-recipient dynamic.
Interesting. So they're recruiting participants based on shared experience, not just building a list of clients.
Exactly. Motivated, active participants.
Okay, that idea of an active base, it brings us to what seems like a core tension, maybe. The dual role of the Ayeneh Center itself.
How so?
Well, on one hand, the language is very emotional, almost therapeutic. They call it a sanctuary.
Right. You definitely see that. They talk about meeting deep psychological needs first. It's a haven for empathy and communication.
A home where you are heard.
A sanctuary where we hope you feel understood. All that points to building trust, psychological safety first, that foundation.
Okay, but then they contrast that therapeutic vision, that haven, with a more, activist one. It's also a base for solidarity awareness and fighting against the social harms.
Yeah.
So how do those two things fit together? A cozy sanctuary versus a base for fighting? Seems like they could be at odds, doesn't it?
It does seem like a potential friction point, yeah. How do you keep the comfort of the haven from, stopping people from engaging in the fight?
Exactly. Does the document suggest how they navigate that?
I think the way they frame it is actually key. That tension might even be part of the design. They seem to tie healing directly to action.
Oh,
The implication is, the only way to truly get past the common pains, the darkness they mention, is to actively engage in that fight.
So the sanctuary is an end goal. It's more like a starting point.
Kind of like a staging ground, yeah. Where trust is built, maybe some wounds are tended to, but just enough so people can mobilize. It provides the psychological safety needed for what might be, difficult collective action.
Okay, that makes sense.
You are listening to Ayeneh Podcast.
So healing enables the fighting. It's not an alternative to it. And to actually do the fighting part, They talk about bringing in help. They mention inviting specialists and experts to join forces.
Right, in a united effort in fighting the darkness.
Does that create a risk, though? You bring in experts.
Right.
Does it become hierarchical?
Yeah.
The non-experts just follow the professionals?
That's a fair question. But look at the wording again. Join forces. It suggests they aren't just coming in to lecture or dictate. They're joining an existing community effort. It's more like professionalizing the fight.
Okay, adding structured resources to the grassroots energy.
Exactly. Blending that clinical or expert knowledge with the lived experience of the people who understand the pain.
Got it. Okay, so that's the internal capacity. But then, and this is where I thought it got really expansive, they immediately talk about external collaboration.
Yes. Inviting other nonprofit organizations to join and collaborate.
Why is that so significant, do you think?
Well, it shows they grasp the scale of the challenge, right? These social harms. They're likely too big for any single group.
So the Ayeneh Center isn't trying to be the only solution.
No, it positions itself more like a hub, maybe, a coordinating point. By bringing in other nonprofits, they can tap into a whole ecosystem of resources, knowledge, avoid duplicating what others are already doing, maximize the impact.
Makes sense. And the result of all this collaboration, the way they empower the community, they lay out 3 specific pillars for that, don't they?
They do. It's very clear. Awareness, education, and prevention.
That 3-pronged approach.
Yeah. That seems to be the core service delivery model, if you want to call it that. Collaboration fuels it, but the goal is making the community more aware, better educated about the harms, and ultimately equipped to stop them before they start, especially thinking about the youth.
Okay, so that framework gives us the how. But the document also gives us a clear why. There's that list of 4 specific things the society needs. It feels like their roadmap.
It really does, and the order they list them in is, well, it's quite deliberate, I think.
Okay, what are they? Can you remind us?
Sure. First, to strengthen the culture of solidarity. Second, to accept our differences. Third, to know the nature of the social harms. And fourth, to understand our common pains.
Interesting. A lot of organizations might start with the internal stuff, right? Like understanding pain or accepting differences, emotional shifts.
Yeah, you might expect that.
But Ayeneh puts strengthening the culture of solidarity, number 1, right at the top. Why prioritize that external action, that unity, over the internal work?
I think it speaks volumes about their focus on mobilization. It's urgent. By putting solidarity first, it's like they're saying unity is the immediate priority, almost like a defensive measure against the social harms.
So build the united front first.
Exactly. And then the internal work, accepting differences, understanding common pains that happens within that unified structure you've already built.
Ah, I see. So you mobilize, you come together, then you tackle the harder internal stuff, using the solidarity you've built to kind of hold things together while you do it.
Precisely. It's quite tactical, isn't it? Especially for a group focused on fighting. You don't wait until everyone feels perfectly understood to start. You start, and understanding grows through the shared action.
So you learn to accept differences and understand pain while you're actually doing the work together, side by side.
Yeah, it makes healing less abstract, more concrete. You're not just, sitting in a room talking about differences. You're working together on awareness campaigns or prevention programs. And that shared purpose builds the solidarity.
Which then makes accepting differences maybe a bit easier.
That seems to be the logic, yeah.
Okay. And that whole idea of mobilization, of action, that really drives the final part of the source, doesn't it?
It really does. They ground it very specifically, too. They acknowledge their context. They are a big community in America, and they have a lot of resources.
That grounding is important, isn't it? It links their potential effectiveness to their actual situation, their size, their resources here in the U.S.
Absolutely. And it leads directly into their final instruction, which is quite metaphorical, but also very specific.
What's that?
The most important thing, they say, is to get united and build a camp together, and that they must help each other and love each other.
Build a camp together. That's a really striking image. What do you think that means in this context? A literal camp?
Probably not literal, no, but metaphorically. A camp implies, well, structure, organization, maybe temporary, but definitely purposeful. It suggests permanence, self-sufficiency, a place designed to sustain action.
So for a community that might feel scattered or isolated?
It's a call to create something solid, to shift from being just a collection of individuals to being an organized, functional unit, a block almost.
Leveraging their resources, as they mentioned, to build this defensive, proactive structure.
Exactly. It connects everything back. Use the resources you have in America, driven by unity and mutual support, to build something tangible, something immediate.
And it's a call for everyone to get involved, active partnership.
Absolutely. That final line really sums it up. Lend a hand so we can lend a helping hand to others.
It puts the onus back on the community itself. The foundation isn't just providing a service, it's asking the community to invest. Not just money, but actual participation.
Yeah, personal action. They need the community to step up to make the vision work.
It's quite a powerful vision when you break it down like that.
Right.
You really do manage to weave together that need for psychological safety, the emotional sanctuary.
With the urgency of a mobilized base ready to fight these social harms.
All built on that strategy of solidarity first, then tackling the differences within that unity.
The core theme seems to be moving from just acknowledging pain passively to actively healing through collective action. And their target youth and families is directly linked to their method, this unified collaborative front.
And ultimately, the success of this whole ambitious plan hinges, according to them, on individuals in the community taking responsibility, recognizing they need to actively participate in building that camp together.
Right. Which leaves us with a final thought, maybe for you, the listener, to chew on. If strengthening solidarity is number one, the top need, and the foundation stresses helping each other, loving each other, what specific kind of collective action, beyond just the awareness and education they mention, what action does the source imply is really the key to bridging those internal differences and making people feel truly understood enough to commit to this fight? Where does that emotional language meet the practical instruction to build something together?
That's a great question. Tying the feeling being understood directly to the doing.
Today, we're undertaking a strategic analysis of the Ayeneh Foundation. This is an organization's focus, its operational focus. Well, it evolved pretty rapidly right after it was founded. It started back in 2000, focusing just on addiction education, but then broadened its scope quite dramatically only 3 years later. Now, this trajectory, combined with its rather ambitious vision for the future Ayeneh Center, it presents us with a fascinating strategic riddle. The tension, as I see it anyway, isn't really about what they do exactly, but more about where their primary energy, their main strategic thrust, must be directed.
And I think the central question we need to answer, based on the material we have, is this. Is Ayeneh's defining strategic priority really rooted in broad external collaboration across a whole host of diverse social issues? Or must it be concentrated, really focused, on the intensive internal process of community healing and strengthening solidarity? Now, I'm going to argue that the Foundation's identity, its strategic core, it's defined by that expansive collaborative mission across multiple issues and organizations.
Okay. Well, I come at it from a slightly different angle. While that expansive outward-facing scope is, it's undeniable, I'm going to maintain that their core strategy must fundamentally prioritize the imperative for intensive internal repair first. Creating empathy, strengthening solidarity within the community, that's not merely a goal. I think it's the essential prerequisite, the thing that legitimizes and frankly sustains any external outreach effort they might undertake.
Right. Let's look at the foundational evidence, though, for the breadth of their mission. The strategic priority, I think, is really signaled by the sheer scope of that 2003 expansion. I mean, they move very swiftly beyond a single sort of medical-focused addiction to actively engage with a really comprehensive, diverse list of social maladies and harms. We're talking about educational programming on things like domestic violence, AIDS, global human rights violations, the plight of refugees, even the children of labor and environmental justice. I mean, this isn't some boutique effort. This is a public commitment to comprehensive, outward-facing engagement with some of the most complex global and social problems out there.
Prominent. But let me offer a different perspective, maybe centered more on the depth of the need that they themselves state. That rapid expansion, sure, it might have been ambitious, but the later vision, the one for the Center, that articulates these critical foundational needs that, well, arguably must be met first. It almost suggests a strategic course correction, or at least a refinement. The language they use is profoundly internal. The center is described as a haven for empathy and communication. It's a sanctuary where we hope you feel understood, and importantly, a base for solidarity awareness. I mean, you don't really build a sanctuary when your primary aim is external institutional advocacy. You build it when the community itself feels fragmented and frankly needs internal repair.
But the vision for the Ayeneh Center, I think it confirms the external collaborative focus just as strongly, maybe even more so. The future plan explicitly dictates that they will, and I quote, invite other nonprofit organizations to join us and collaborate in an effort to empower the community with awareness, education, and prevention. Now that outlines a concrete strategy, right? It's built on leveraging external institutional partnerships and expertise specifically to conduct these wide-ranging awareness campaigns. Their mandate seems clearly to lead the charge in fighting against the social harms that lurks around preying on our youth and families. The fight itself feels fundamentally external, and collaboration is the chosen strategic mechanism.
I'm just not entirely convinced that institutional collaboration is the primary strategic lever here, because the context of that collaboration feels crucial. The strategic pivot towards depth, as I see it, is defined by the needs of the society itself, needs that are clearly internal, like strengthening the culture of solidarity, like accepting our differences. If the identified deficits are internal cohesion and empathy, well then those must become the foundational strategic priority. It just seems logical. Furthermore, the stated goal of unifying the big community in America so they can get united and build a camp together, that strongly implies that internal cohesion is the essential prerequisite. External partners, sure, they're invited to help empower that unified base, but not to replace the need for building it in the first place.
Okay, so let's move into the core debate then. Maybe focusing first on this primary role. Is it broad outreach or is it deep containment? My position, it remains that the strategic methodology, how they chose to engage from early on, that dictates the primary role. Their historical methodology involved working with experts, psychologists, activists across profoundly diverse, often global topics, right? Human rights, environmental protection. This emphasis on outreach and didactic awareness, it implies that their core role is fundamentally to illuminate and educate on the nature of social harms globally and locally as the primary means of fighting them.
That broad methodology, though, it requires an infrastructure of resilience, doesn't it? I mean, if you're going to put your community leaders and advocates out there into the field to fight such diverse and, frankly, profound social maladies, you mentioned refugee plight, domestic violence, you have to first ensure your internal community structure is sound. The emphasis on the Ayeneh Center as a haven, as a home where you are heard, it suggests to me that the foundation is strategically acknowledging the toll that this kind of external, broad engagement takes on people. It feels like a necessary pivot toward deep, contained internal work. If the foundation serves as a place for those who, quote, understand the pain of the society and want to play a constructive role in its healing, well then, the priority becomes healing those internal wounds first. You build strength internally before you can effectively project it outward.
Okay, I respect the imperative for healing. Absolutely. But how does one strategically measure something like strengthening solidarity? Isn't that an inherently less quantifiable, and therefore maybe a riskier strategic focus compared to measurable outputs like, say, producing weekly educational programs, securing partnerships, or running defined awareness campaigns? The historical pattern, what we see them doing, it shows the foundation favoring highly structured, measurable outputs like radio and television programming, which are inherently external and didactic. They seem to be acting primarily as a beacon, shining a light on the social landscape, not primarily as an internal confessional or therapy group.
Well, I'd argue that the quantification of cultural health is indeed harder, no question. But that difficulty doesn't negate its strategic necessity. If the community is internally fractured, or if there's a failure to accept differences, which is a key stated societal need they identify, then any external advocacy risks becoming fractured itself, maybe even unsustainable. The source material is very clear here. Ayeneh Center is designed to be the base for solidarity and awareness. What does a base do? It provides stability, resources, a shared sense of purpose. If the foundation were to skip that step, the step of establishing that deep containment, that base, then the external fights they engage in, well, they risk causing burnout and potentially further fragmentation among their own advocates. To me, the strategic priority has to be building the culture of solidarity first as the foundational asset.
That's a compelling argument for the base. I'll grant you that.
You are listening to Ayeneh Podcast.
But let's transition maybe into our second point, interpreting collaboration. If the goal is strategic sustainability, as you suggest, my interpretation of collaboration focuses very heavily on institutional leverage. The future vision stresses collaboration by, again, inviting specialists and experts to join forces in a united effort, and it explicitly calls on other nonprofit organizations to join. This, to me, focuses the strategy squarely on scaling their efforts by leveraging external institutional resources and expertise, specifically for prevention and education. This looks like an institutional partnership model designed to achieve broad, systemic impact.
That's an interesting point, though I guess I would frame the priority differently again. While yes, external institutional collaboration is clearly mentioned, the emotional and strategic language surrounding collaboration feels overwhelmingly centered on internal grassroots unity. The community itself is repeatedly framed as the ultimate, the essential resource. They stress the need for community members to help each other and even love each other. The fundamental strategic mandate seems to be empowerment from within, urging them to lend a hand so we can lend a helping hand to others. Now, this implies that the true essential collaboration must first be realized internally within what they call the big community in America. Institutional partnerships in this light, they feel supplemental to that core communal unity, not the primary strategic driver itself.
But the text describing those institutional partnerships specifically states they are collaborating in an effort to empower the community with awareness, education, and prevention. Those sound like high-level strategic outputs to me, things that often require structured institutional support, maybe legal aid, organized policy influence, scalable budgets, things like that. A spontaneous grassroots movement can provide energy, absolutely, but it often requires that institutional structure, like the specialists and experts they mentioned, to achieve the kind of prevention and education goals they've set across issues as diverse as environmental justice and human rights. To manage that kind of scope, the strategy almost has to rely on leveraging established, organized external bodies.
I'm sorry, I just don't buy that the institutional support comes first. Let me explain why. The stated strategic goal is the empowerment of the base. If that base isn't unified, if the culture of solidarity is weak, then bringing in outside institutional help risks being, ineffective or maybe just temporary, right? If the community doesn't truly own the fight, those external partnerships might address symptoms, sure, but they could fail to build lasting resilience. The source material consistently frames the internal cohesion, the community getting united and build a camp together, as the strongest resource they possess. So the strategy, I believe, is prioritizing the development of that social capital above all else.
Okay, if we agree, though, that collaboration must lead to action, the crucial next step is maybe defining what kind of awareness actually drives that action. Let's pivot to the third point, the function of awareness itself. Historically, their radio and television programs, they focus pretty strictly on issue-specific awareness, explaining the, quote, international disease of addiction or diagnosing the challenges of AIDS and domestic violence. Awareness in that context seems to be about gaining sort of forensic knowledge of specific social harms in order to fight them effectively and externally. It's a didactic, almost diagnostic function.
That's a compelling argument for their historical practice, certainly. But have you considered how the vision for the Ayeneh Center might fundamentally shift the strategic focus of awareness going forward? The immediate needs they list are things like strengthening solidarity and accepting differences. So awareness in this foundational context seems less about identifying discrete external maladies and much more about fostering empathy, recognizing our common pains, and building a unified, resilient culture. The required awareness becomes internal, it becomes relational. I mean, if you haven't first raised awareness about the critical need for internal unity and acceptance within the community, how effectively can you then deploy that community to educate the broader public about, say, environmental justice or refugee rights? It feels like the foundation of the pyramid has to be that cultural understanding.
I suppose I believe the Foundation probably sees these functions as simultaneous, maybe mutually reinforcing. However, if forced to prioritize, the sheer weight of their initial and very rapid expansion into these global and structural issues, human rights, refugee plight, that demonstrates for me a strategic commitment to issue-specific awareness that really transcends internal solidarity as the primary goal. They seem compelled to be educators about external threats and harms first, perhaps because those harms are seen as existential and immediate. The strategy feels externally focused, geared towards problem-solving out in the world.
And I would suggest that the foundation, perhaps through the very vision of the Adran Center, recognizes that they actually cannot effectively solve those external problems until they address internal division. The need to accept our differences is explicitly stated as a societal need that must be fixed. So addressing that internal cultural need becomes the highest strategic priority precisely because it enables all the subsequent external action. Therefore, the primary function of awareness looking forward must be cultural understanding. That's what provides the emotional and communal strength needed to sustain the long, difficult fight against those external threats. Without that internal healing, I fear the external fight will eventually collapse under its own weight.
Okay, so to summarize my position then, the evidence, as I read it, consistently points to a strategic commitment to breadth and comprehensive external action. From that initial, very rapid expansion back in 2003, which took on this vast portfolio of social ills, right through to the explicit future goal of leveraging external institutional alliances, the Foundation's identity seems forged as a wide-ranging educational platform, one committed to diagnosing and combating a whole spectrum of deeply rooted social problems. The strategy looks expansive, utilizing institutional collaboration and didactic awareness to proactively fight social harms wherever they lurk.
And my conclusion is that the Foundation's ultimate success really hinges on its ability to execute that more intimate vision of the Ayeneh Center, creating the necessary internal environment first, one of empathy, communication, solidarity, a true sanctuary. That feels like the non-negotiable step. Without first strengthening the culture of solidarity and addressing the common pains internally, any expansive collaboration will simply lack the unified base required to truly empower the community and sustain that external effort in the long run. The internal healing is the strategic focus, I believe, and it's the only way to make the expansive mission truly viable long-term.
It is clear, then, that the Ayeneh Foundation faces, well, a tricky balancing act. It needs to simultaneously engage in this expansive collaboration to fight immediate external social harms, while also dedicating intensive resources to building that cultural cohesion and healing within its own community.
Unnecessary tension, indeed, and one that certainly illuminates the complexity inherent in any organization that's aiming for fundamental societal change. It leaves us, I think, to consider whether that foundational internal strength must fully precede or perhaps just accompany large-scale external ambition.